Welcome to the Deeper Into Movies podcast. My name is Stephen T. Hanley. I'm the founder and lead curator of Deeper Into Movies. We are a pop-up cinema based in London and New York. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by writer-director Richard Linklater. Richard has had one of the most unique careers of any director I can think of. Maybe like Soderbergh and Gus Van Sant are close. He's just one of those guys who can make anything. No matter what he does, it's distinctly and uniquely him, but he can do any genre and pretty much just make whatever he wants. It's incredible. As I say to him, the fact that he's the same guy who made Waking Life and School of Rock is just nuts. And I always remember I met Linklater at a screening of Fast Food Nation. Again, who would read that book and then say, let me turn this into a narrative drama movie? Crazy. Anyway, I met him at the London Film Festival and I said to him, hey, would you mind signing my copy of Slacker? And he was like, no, not at all. And he wrote, to Stephen, an honorary slacker. And he was like, man, it's really cool you bought the Criterion edition of this. I know it's not cheap, but wow, it's such a good special edition and I love the extras. I really appreciate you spending that extra money on this. And I said, oh, that's cool. Would you mind if I ask you a couple more questions? And he said, not to be a dick, but I've got to get to a press junket in half an hour and they're picking me up down the road. And I was like, oh, okay, not to worry. And he's like, but wait, do you want to walk and talk with me? And so me and him had like a 10-minute discussion walking down to where he was being picked up, talking about his movies, film advice, films I should watch. And then he got in his car, said goodbye. And afterwards I was like, fuck, this was literally like a scene out of a Linklater movie. I had a total walk and talk with him. What a cool guy. And as you will hear, nothing has changed. Richard is very warm, super interesting, and just uniquely himself. Here's me and Richard Linklater. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How's things with you?
Oh, good.
Are you in Austin?
I'm in Austin.
Thanks for taking time to talk.
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to start. Random question. I'm a huge Bogdanovich fan, and I'm really curious why you picked Long Last Love and Nickelodeon out of all his titles for your...
Well, I think those are the two underappreciated Bogdanovich. You know, it's my theory that Peter never made a bad movie. He just did his thing. And the world around him changed and the attitudes changed toward him, his success and his perceived arrogance and all that. But if you really look at the movies purely, they're just wonderful. You know, they're so sweet and, you know, in love with movies. And I don't know, it's just time to celebrate him. I mean, it always has been. But, you know, when he's gone, you go back and look at those and you're like, holy crap. You know, they were much, I think, two of the more unfairly maligned movies, especially Long Last Love. Nickelodeon was just more ignored than hated, but Long Last Love was hated. So anyway, I've got a little attitude about it. I want to share it with an audience.
No, I'm totally with you on this. I'm always telling people to watch She's Funny That Way. I think that's an incredible screwball comedy.
It's wonderful. It's a great double feature with What's Up, Doc? You know? Yeah. It has a lot of the same people in it too. It's a wonderful film in itself, and it's wonderful within his own filmography. You know, I don't know. He's just he's really, really special. And like I just, you know, just a consummate director.
When I was in New York before the pandemic, I went to, I don't know if you've ever been to Jerry Ollinger's movie memorabilia store.
I haven't.
It's great. It's just these film geeks, and they've just got an archive of posters and paraphernalia.
Oh, I got to get there.
But they're really sweet guys. You come in, there's no pressure to buy anything, and they'll just say, who are you into? What kind of posters do you want to see? Any favorite directors? Any favorite movies? And I said, yeah, I really want to get some Peter Bogdanovich posters. And they were like, can't stand that guy. And I was like, well, you guys are fucking idiots. And I was like, why don't you love Peter? And they're like, oh, he's so full of himself. And yeah, I don't know why they had that attitude. And I spent my entire time whilst I was looking through the posters, just trying to change their opinion and say, go watch Saint Jack, go watch She's Funny That Way. But I said I really need a poster of Vale Loft. It's like one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. And they were like, oh, we don't think we got anything. And I was like, well, it makes sense because it was self-released and it was like his tribute to Dorothy to get that film out there after she passed away. Because I think everyone, I don't know, I guess they thought a romantic comedy with a leading lady who got murdered is just not marketable, which is just really horrible and sad. But yeah, anyway, they found the poster and I bought it, but I don't think I changed their mind on Peter.
But the tell is that, we're not Bogdanovich. What does that mean? You don't like
because they thought he was it was his character that they thought he was cocky and arrogant, but I don't think so. I find him personally really charming and
super charming,
the best raconteur and walking encyclopedia of film history.
Yeah, he's all of our like sweet, he's your gentle film professor who knows everything and yet really cares about what your tastes are and what you're into. I don't know. That attitude, it just kind of drives me crazy. Oh, I don't like it. It's like, that's such a 70s thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I think he was I think Quentin said it in, I don't know if you've seen that amazing documentary, One Day Since Yesterday.
Yeah.
Where he says, I think he was the first director celebrity. Yeah. And so everyone was kind of like, fuck that guy, with his Playboy models and all his success and stuff.
Yeah, everybody hated that. But he was kind of taking off from, Orson Welles and Hitchcock were celebrities, but in a different way. You didn't know that they were having like a fun personal life. He modernized it with, he's a celebrity director who makes these hit movies, critically acclaimed, all that. But then he's also of his time, he's dating an actress. I don't know. I just think the whole image, they just went, oh, screw this guy. And, he's hosting the Tonight Show and, he's a little, but if you really get it from his perspective, he's really just wanting to share, he's a little like Cole Porter and that the world was kind of a great romantic place. Why wouldn't you appreciate someone's success? He appreciated other, it's like, why wouldn't you, it was just, he didn't think bad thoughts about other people. So why would they think bad thoughts about him? I think he was strangely naive that way.
And what I think is really cool looking back on it is he was so out of kind of Raging Bulls and Easy Riders kind of clique of like Scorsese, Coppola and De Palma, and just and all his interests were much more in classic Hollywood. Yeah. But I think being in his own lane, and he always says like he barely smoked weed, wasn't really into partying per se.
Well, he just unabashedly himself, he wasn't listening to the music of the day. He was listening to Frank Sinatra and, at the height of, different eras when everyone else is going, punk rock or whatever's going on. Yeah. He had his own taste, did his own thing. Yeah. Talk about your own lane, but it's amazingly consistent. He's kind of a West Coast Woody Allen in that regard.
Yeah.
Woody never bent. He wasn't as cinema loving in that regard. He's more of kind of a comic, theater, writer guy. But Peter was just pure cinema,
I think Saint Jack is really criminally ignored as well. That's a great story about middle-aged male friendship, which you don't see that much on screen.
Yeah, people love that movie. I mean, people who we know, film people, it seems like everybody I know loves that movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you get outside of our world, you realize, but that could go for the majority of cinema, what we consider cinema.
Yeah. The other thing I read, which is I was really curious about, Raging Bull was hugely important for you. I usually ask directors what films really sparked something in them, but I read Raging Bull and I was kind of surprised you picked that one as a eureka moment for you.
Well, it was kind of like time and place,
Right.
I was in college. I was a, sophomore in college, wanting to be some kind of playwright. I didn't know what, I was definitely a writer, but that's what it was the first, one of the early films I saw of like, oh, cinema as some kind of, I mean, it sounds so dumb by today's standards, but like art. Oh, you could express something deep and dark with film.
Mm-hmm.
Films were just entertainment, I wasn't taking them that seriously. And I saw that in a commercial at the, Christmas release at the mall, that kind of thing. I was like, oh my God, wow. My dad said, oh yeah, that guy must have lived there. And we had these neighbors who were Italian, grew up in the Bronx, and they said, that's exactly what it was like. So artistically, I thought that was such a triumph for people to say, oh yeah, that's exactly what it felt like to live in that area at that time. And I don't know, the psychology of the character, De Niro's, the performances were so, I don't know, all of it just really got me thinking about film. That's all. That was followed by just thousands of other films, but that was one that just kind of triggered something in my searching young artistic brain, like, oh, film expressive, maybe, but what can you say?
I was signed Criterion Slacker from you from when I bumped into like BFI Fast Food Nation premiere.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, you were to an honorary Slacker, which was like so cool.
And indeed,
when I was watching it back, I remember there was always kind of like it's a film about nothing or nothing so much happens, but it's so technically accomplished. Did you know going in it would be that? I know, I was just thinking you've got 20 or so characters all coming through. That's a hell of a lot of people to wrangle. You got so many tracking shots. I was looking back and technically it's so accomplished.
I think that probably worked on some subliminal level, why the film stood out. A lot of indie films just kind of throw the camera up on sticks and film people talking or whatever. I was like, I had a really rigorous cinematic design, for that movie. It wasn't just random, I hadn't really thought about it. It's like, no, there was a plan, there was something I was trying to experiment with, not only narrative storytelling, but just the style of real time and I don't know. So I think you don't see in these no budget films, even the first shot of the movie, one of the first shots in the movie, once he gets out of the cab, there's an elaborate crane shot.
Yeah.
You don't see that in a lot of $20,000 films, but and it has Steadicam shot and all that. I do remember filmmakers coming up to me like, hey, how did you do that? That's crazy. Like at the, indie levels, like, wow, how did you do that? I said, well, I talked to Steadicam guy to give me half a day, we knew there was a crane and, Austin there was a lot of generosity toward the film. And a lot of my crew members knew people who knew people and we had connections. And I don't know, that's just the spirit of how it got made. But yeah, I wanted it to look a certain way. So it had it definitely had a design,
And how did you feel going from 20K to was like 6 million for Dazed?
Yeah.
Were you confident? Were you nervous?
Whew. At that stage of your life, I think it's incumbent on you for your insecurity and lack of confidence has to be totally overridden by your absolute passion.
Right.
You have to, and obsession. You have to be nervous because I knew I was going to be experiencing a lot of things I hadn't experienced before. Just namely taking money from an entity to make a movie. What does that mean? Are they going to be watching my dailies? Are they going to be judging me? Or, what's the relationship going to be like with the studio? My head's full of bad stories and, bad things can happen. And so you're a little paranoid and, all the above. But I was so excited just to have that opportunity. I was ready. I'd been thinking about that film for a while. I had all the music. I was ready, but I still, even though it was my third movie technically, and I'd made a bunch of shorts, it definitely was a organizational leap. But I was so thrilled to have the support system. On Slacker, you do everything. You're your own PA. You run around town looking for a prop or a shirt, or you're taking actors around. It's like, you're going to the bus station to pick up the film stock. You're doing everything. So it was like great to have departments. It's like, oh, I don't have to do the wardrobe. There, I can talk to people and look at it and go, yes, no. Should that be, you like this watch or that one? Oh, I like that one. Like, oh, wow. And you can be overwhelmed by that, or you can think of that like, hey, all these people here are trying to help me make the best movie I can, which is pretty exciting. There's a system set up for me to succeed, but it's also a system that will totally swallow you if you lose a step in it, if you can't swim in it. So it was precarious, but it was thrilling too. So, and that's the film that makes or breaks you. I knew going into that, by the time this is over, I'm either going to prove to myself and maybe the world I can do this, or I'm meant to do this, or I'm not really cut out for this, so you don't really know, I think you're as passionate I was and felt I had a lot of films. I wasn't, you just don't know how you'll respond. It's like, going to the big leagues. Like, am I ready for this? I think I am, but maybe the world has other plans. So it was definitely a 15-round match,
Mm-hmm. I was thinking back to when I first saw it. I saw it when I was in college. I was going to movies. I was going to gigs, making short films, going to galleries. And I saw this movie, and I've never been as bummed out as to how boring my teenage years feel compared to those 2 hours. It was, and a lot of people I gave it to felt like, fuck, our life sucked compared to this. We have no muscle cars and keg parties, and our friends don't look like Mila Jovovich and stuff. And
yeah,
has other people said this to you, that it's a nostalgia for something I've never experienced?
Yeah, well, it was my greatest hits kind of all played into one. I mean, I was really trying to capture, believe it or not, at the core of it. It's so funny. I was trying to, the inspiration for that movie was teenage boredom, driving around looking for something to do, trying to be cool. That's what I always thought of that movie, just guys in a car looking for where the action was and not really finding it. But but you can't help but want to be entertaining. It got funnier and it got more, I don't know. I just kind of packed it up with fun incident from all the characters. And I don't know. Yeah. Just trying to make it fun. I mean, I wanted it to feel real, but I have had people say that they wish they lived back then, which I think is sad. I was like, oh, it was actually a pretty crappy time. But I think every teenager would do anything to be somewhere where they're not, where they are, be somewhere other than where they find themselves.
I do love the fact that they always say like, oh, this party sucks, or
yeah,
maybe the next year will be better, or let's go someplace else. But it has got that great thing where you don't realize, when I look back at college and when I was at film school and stuff, I was so happy and had so much freedom, but you didn't even know at the time that was such a beautiful time of just hanging out and watching movies. And
it's like the human mind is conditioned to not appreciate the moment. I mean, there's entire, obviously disciplines and religions, reminding you to be in the moment, but it's almost impossible. You're just thinking forward. You're thinking what's next. Your mind's elsewhere while you're in the middle of actually having a pretty good time. No matter how oppressive and horrible your circumstances feel, it's the people and the energy. And, it's I've covered this quite a bit. My little sequel to Days years later, Everybody Wants Some. I was confronting a different thing about freedom. Like, the guys actually did have a ton of freedom. You're away from home. You got your own place. It was college. The difference between college and high school. High school was all about oppression. And to me, college was about freedom and choices and really making yourself whoever you want to be.
Was the paddling real? Did that really go on in
yes.
the hazing rituals?
Yeah, that did go on in my town, and it goes on in a lot of colleges, like fraternities. Yeah, it's amazing the pain people want to dish out to each other, and then under the guise of some kind of initiation, But I saw it as a metaphor. You're always the new kid getting abused somehow.
And you assigned everyone albums, all your characters albums.
Well, songs, artists, albums. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Who did you give? What did you give to Matthew McConaughey?
I think he was pretty much metal. Guitar guy, Ted Nugent, Leonard Skinner, a little bit of that. He's probably digging the Doobie Brothers. I forget exactly, but.
And what did you give Ben Affleck? Did you give him anything? He was such a douche. I was running what he listened to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I forget what I gave Ben. Probably the same stuff. He'd probably have a dose of country too.
Sure.
I was kind of avoiding. There wasn't a lot of country in the music, but I'm pretty sure Ben, if it's Texas, is listening to a lot of country.
I know you said you didn't like the marketing campaign when it came out, and you said it didn't do great at the box office, and you said that I think they kind of led into more a stoner comedy. How did you feel afterwards? Were you
that whole movie, the marketing of that movie, that was kind of a blur because a weird thing happened. Like I was making a studio film the whole time. I was working for Universal, and then somewhere in post-production, they handed it off to an indie distributor kind of thing. So my studio film, the thing I had gone through the ringer for, suddenly became like an indie film. I'm like, wait, that's not exactly what I signed up for, to be treated like a odd little film. I thought I was making a film for everybody, anyone who'd ever been through high school. I imagined, again, youth, naive, like, oh, I want this to be a big hit, like American Graffiti or something, like, why wouldn't this be everyone like this movie? You have to think that way, when you're making a movie. So I guess I was just disappointed to realize they didn't think it was that commercial. And they were perceiving the movie as a movie with a bunch of actors nobody knows, with no plot, with no good ending. If you really break the movie down, here's all its problems. Here's why it's not going to make any money. They can just do that all day long. Total glass half empty kind of thing, where I was saying audiences like you'd have these test screenings and everybody would applaud and be laughing. I said, that's a great response, isn't it? And then the cards would come back in. Nah, they're grading it not as high as we would like. And, they were judging it when asked, what about the ending? How'd you like the ending? And they're like, oh, I don't know. What's the ending? It's like, oh, people don't like your ending. So it was all negative. It was all what it wasn't. So it was weird to feel that twist. But, at the end of the day, it's a success for its indie distribution. It made, my category for it got taken away. But viewing it as it is, it was a success and continues to be. I just, what I learned to not have big expectations. That's really at the end of the day what I learned is like, oh, I put all my psychic energy toward the production. Like that's the thing I had to learn how to do. What I really found out I had to do was survive distribution. It was to psychically be able to deal with a film like that coming out and whatever disappointments or however it's treated by the people who made it, so I don't know. That's where I started had to wrap my head around,
Yeah, I remember speaking to Joe Swanberg and I asked him what advice you would give young filmmakers. And he said, even if you have success on your first film, you probably won't on your second one. And everything is just going to be completely up and down throughout your entire career. I think he had a great success with his first film and he thought everything after that is going to be an endless, highway of green lights. But he said, just get ready for all the speed bumps.
You realize there's only nobody sees a filmmaking career like that. Even the most successful. Like if you were to sit and talk with Steven Spielberg, I'm sure it's like, oh, I couldn't get that film made, or I didn't have, it's just frustrating in its nature. probably the perceptions of films and other people. You just can't be doing it for those reasons. But yeah, I think you're lucky to have any early success at all. Or it's somewhat necessary, I think. So I realized my first 3 films were successful for sure in the most important way, culturally and within the industries and stuff. Anyway, that was actually a good start to some kind of career, even though at the time I wasn't truly satisfied with any of it, But again, that's the human condition.
Yeah, where was your head at after Dazed? What were you thinking in terms of your career or where to go next? Or
I was just focused on getting my next movie made. The day Dazed came out, I was casting Before Sunrise. I had written that in the spring while I was in post-production on Dazed, and I just determined that's the next film I was going to make. I was going to go back, take kind of what I was doing on a bigger scale there and just kind of make it largely between 2 people. That's what I felt I had to do, make a personal little intimate story about these 2 people. So that set a tone there. I wasn't waiting around to see how Dazed did and get hired to do something, looking back. And I had opportunities that fall when Dazed did come out, and I was trying to get Before Sunrise off the ground. I didn't have it financed or anything. I was just trying to find the right 2 actors and, feeling my way through that process. And I met with every studio in town. Everybody liked Dazed. My little perceived disappointment in it wasn't the industry's perception. Everybody liked the film. Everybody wanted to meet me. I didn't really appreciate that at the time either. I went around and had meetings at every studio, some of the companies. They all offered me deals, the typical studio deal, like, it's a 3-picture deal and you'll go into development on these things and we'll send you, and I went with the studio. It was Castle Rock, a company within a studio, who just offered me creative freedom, and they liked Before Sunrise. They read the script and hey, we think that could be good. How much would it cost? Oh, nothing. They're like, yeah, we should do that. I'm like, yeah, I'll do. So looking back, I actually turned down. I was so enthusiastic to have the opportunity to make that movie. I turned down probably $1 million+ that I could have made in some of these other deals to make 100 and something thousand making that movie. But I was just glad to have that chance. So I think looking back, that probably set the tone for what the rest of my career, because I was just, whatever would help me make the film I was hoping to make next. In other words, I wasn't approaching it like a career at all. I wasn't thinking long-term career type things. I never thought I belonged. I never approached it like a job or a career. I was just excited about the next film I'm trying to make. So that's bad on one hand. It probably cost me a lot. On the other hand, it's just been my life ever since, I guess.
Well, that's what I think is so remarkable about your career, is just how varied and skillful you can move between genres. How different your films are has almost become your signature trademark in a way. And the fact you're the same guy who made Waking Life and School of Rock is just really incredible.
Well, yeah, it's funny. You kind of earn your way into that. That wasn't, at first I felt a little like, oh, you're the Gen X hip guy doing films about young people. So I remember when you get out of that a little bit, there's a little bit, especially in the 90s, it was kind of like, wait a second, you shouldn't be. The first time I felt I really stepped out of my slot I had been assigned was when I did The Newton Boys. For me, a bigger film. It was over $20 million, 50-day shoot. I was recreating the teens and 20s, true story. It was this thing I became obsessed with, a fun historical romp. And then I just realized, oh, no one thinks I should be doing films like this. It was a bit of a, whoa, there's something incongruous with me doing a film like this.
Oh, the concept of selling out was so intense in the Gen X era. It was like, dude, fucking hell.
I mean, you can read reviews of Before Sunrise. That was my sellout film, even though it was less than half the budget of Days. That they were just projecting onto it. It's like, when you take a director and put him with a star vehicle, they thought Ethan Hawke was a star. You know, like people were just projecting such kind of crazy things in that area of selling out. So that was our generation, which is, I wish there was more of that today, just for the artist's sake. It's good to have that on your shoulder saying, you know, it was definitely, but I never considered making something like the Newton Boys. That was a story we had found, my friends and I, and, you know, I really wanted to make a movie about that and got obsessed with the same reason you make any movie. It just cost more because of its own nature. It was a bigger movie. But I remember being kind of like, okay, you know, it's around the same time. Remember the Coen brothers did Hudsucker Proxy around that same time. They got the same thing. Like, what are you guys doing this bigger movie with Paul Newman? And you're like, go back to your indie, whatever we think you are.
Yeah.
It was so real. And, you know, the goal back then was I was living that dream, you know, to have a film at Sundance and then make your, you know, get people to pay for your next films, but not really. I guess there wasn't the sellout channel there is today where you get hired to do, you go right into superhero world and things like that. Sequels. If you think about it, it's a pretty entitled position to be picking between your indie or your studio, you know, big label, little label. Mm-hmm. That's a privileged position to be in. But the scrutiny was intense for sure. But yeah, no, different time, different culture. You know, I was lucky I'm forever lucky that chronologically I caught the era I did. It would be very different today. I don't know what I'd be doing getting started.
Do people approach you and say, as a filmmaker starting today, what would your advice be? Or I know you've just said patience and hard work is kind of your mantra.
Yeah, hard work. On one hand, nothing's changed. But, I mean, I don't know if it's those same stepping stones are there. Like you make your indie hit and then you get a chance, you know, a studio or something will give you more money. Now I think it's like you make an indie hit and you could maybe pitch your next thing is a series. You know, where do you fit in the industry? No one really wants to fund your next movie because they don't want to fund movies anyway. So I think your best hope is to get it into some kind of series arrangement, which, you know, I hate, you know, as an option. I love movies. So yeah, I guess it's just a struggle. It always has been. It's more pronounced now. But on the other hand, it's kind of the best time to make a film. You know, I have some friends. I have a lot of like young intern people in their 20s that I'm always in touch with through the Austin Film Society. I have two friends who scraped together $30,000 and they're making their film. They're starting this week. So two guys I know. So I'm like, you know, between GoFundMe and some parents' money, just old school, scrape together the 30 grand, make your film. And I'm like, well, some things have never changed. You know, I was doing that over 30 years ago. So that's good. I don't, you know, maybe you get into Sundance. If the film's weird, maybe you become a midnighter there. I don't know. It's a hustle.
Yeah, I think you can kind of make, I would say, I think you can kind of make anything, but getting eyes on it with the amount of content and platforms and noise that's out there, that's the real struggle.
Well, cultural impact is really different. You know, it's hard to break through with films I think things are so kind of the trend of box office and materialism and success has been so steady all these years that we've gotten to a place where if it's not a sensation in money terms, it's like, why would anyone pay attention to it? I don't think you don't get to join the cultural conversation if your film makes, you know, $1 million or, you know, there's less mainstream curiosity, I think, in the culture for weird indie stuff, where there used to be. You know, it was like everyone had a diet a cultural diet that included, some indie films here and some indie music. And then, and now it's just all here. There's less room, I feel like, in people's cultural palettes. But I don't know. I could be wrong. It feels like that. I just don't, I'm probably not the best judge, but I don't feel there's the cultural excitement for indie films. They're not part of a bigger conversation that I was lucky to be a part of, even with my little, not that high grossing films. You might be on a magazine, on actors on magazine cover. You're getting, you see the film's referenced in cultural language, and people are talking about just the buzz. There was just more cultural buzz for films back then of an indie film. Now there's still that buzz. It's strictly for huge ass. It's for the films that are obvious.
Yeah, I think movies have just left the center of the culture and discussion.
I know, which is heartbreaking for guys like us.
It's crazy. Even when people come around and they're like, "You've got Blu-rays," and I'm like, "Fuck yes, I've got Blu-rays." These films aren't on streaming.
Yeah,
I love audio commentaries. I love bonus features. And when they get wiped off streaming, I'm always worried they're going to get caught up in some weird studio archive somewhere and not seen as a viable film to release and stuff. Even like Steve Buscemi's Trey's Lounge, I've got a DVD of that, and that's not on any platform anywhere, and I've no idea where it's. Yeah,
this idea though, you can stream everything. It's just, that's bullshit. So much great stuff is not available. That's a crime. That if Tree's Lounge isn't available for say a young person who's finding out about indie cinema for the first time, they should be able to watch Tree's Lounge like that.
Yeah.
But they can't, because it's not somebody, that film was owned by a company that probably got bought by a company and went bankrupt. The people who own it might not even know they own the film.
Yeah. My DVD release is weirdly by Pioneer, the consumer electronics brand. So I'm wondering, did those guys dip their toe into DVD world for like a few films?
Well, they did for like 18 months, and then they changed the business plan and they flushed that. Yeah, it's hard to think of what we consider such a big part of our lives, the art of our lives. And you realize it's a commodity for somebody. And I've had films fall into bankruptcies and not know who owned it. And, it's just, that's the deal you make in the indie world, is you're just not sure of your long-term, pattern, your long-term health. It could be precarious, but I always chose to make the film, even when I knew that future success was kind of iffy. I didn't know, like when you're making a bigger studio, it's like, well, it's going to come out and they're going to release, you've got a lot of muscle behind the film. But I've entered into a lot of films with the future of that fairly uncertain, just knowing, well, I'll get the film made. And my deal is, if I make the best film imaginable, maybe it'll have a shot, maybe it'll get seen. But, you control that not very well,
I was thinking, for Boyhood, did you manage to get the full 12-year budget up front? Or did you have to?
I got an agreement, but it came in year by year.
Wow.
Little 200,000 every year to shoot on film. And it never went up, even with inflation or, low budget union rates, or, the cost of making film and paying people. Everybody's rates went up, but they never gave me more money. So by the end, we were really scrounging, I was putting in my own money and stuff, but it was, what a blessing that someone would ever say yes to that project. Such a weird ask.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that pitch meeting must have. I suppose you have the 7-Up series to reference and stuff, but
I don't think I referenced that, because what I was asking was pretty different. It wasn't shoot every 7 years. It was like, no, every year.
Right. Yeah, true.
And it's a narrative. I can't even tell you, but here's the here's what's going to happen. And I have movies. I have Patricia and Ethan, and it was a weird ask, but it was a logical ask too, in a strange way. I was asking a guy who had already done 2 films with me, Waking Life and Tape, 2 indie films, but he liked them both. He knew I was, and what I was telling him, just asking the big question, hey, 12 years from now, I think it'll be a good film. And that he agreed. If we get lucky and it all works. And every year, Jonathan Searing at IFC had to jump through some hoops when he had to answer, like, what's this 200,000 you're spending every year? When are we going to see it? What is this? The heat went up over the years. He says every year and when they started, this is how the indie world changed. When we started, they were producing a lot of movies. So it was just one more film on their production slate. They might produce 20 films that year, or 15. Halfway through, we were their only film in production. They had quit producing films and they were just acquiring films.
Mm-hmm.
Why spend $1 million making a film, or a couple million, when you can just buy a film for 200,000 from these people who got the money on their own and made their film, and be selective. So the business model changed. We were their only film in production for like the last 5 years of it.
Did you ever have any concerns down the line? Like, what if Ethan gets booked on a huge TV series, or the lead actor falls out of love with his project and kind of finds it strange as he's growing up and doesn't want to be involved, or that something might happen along the way to derail this epic undertaking?
There was practical considerations, like it was always Ethan and Patricia's schedules.
Mm-hmm.
This was always going to be everyone's side project, no money side project. So with that, Patricia was on a show the first time. From the second year on, she was on Medium for like the next 7 years. So we were always working around her schedule. Ethan was always busy. He was in a film or a play. The worst is a play. When they're working 6 days a week in New York, it's like, oh my God, how do you get out for a day? You leave in the last performances at 8 o'clock. It's like, oh my God, it's so tough. So we were always scheduling around that. The bigger question you asked, like, would if someone just fell out of love with the project and didn't want to do it the next year? I never really thought of that. I thought it would be so fun and people would look forward to it every year. It would just be a fun thing to be doing. And that's what the case ended up being. The only one who got a little wobbly was my daughter, Lorelai. Somewhere in her awkward teen years, she got a little tired of it. Never like she threatened to quit. She just suggested we kill off her character or something. It was very systematic. Every year I just started thinking about the next year. We'd wrap and I'd tell them, okay, next year you're going to fall in love. I would just tell them what's happening. And then I'd have a year to really kind of think about it and work with the actors or talk about it. And then we'd shoot for 3 days. So no, it was so abstract. The first, let's say 6 years, 7 years, the end was so far away. It's like, I would think about it in first grade. You're not thinking about high school graduation. That's a
right.
lot. It's abstraction to you. But you hit junior high, you're kind of thinking like, well, yeah, I know some older people. At some point you could see the end around the corner. And then the last couple of years, it was a strange, really unique momentum build, and every year got better. Just like, you hope your life gets a little better every year growing up. You're a little more yourself. You have a little more, I don't know, strength in the world, little more, I don't know. So that just, that's how it felt.
You make it sound so easy. This patience and discipline you have is just really. Do you think that's the athlete in you? Do you think that's from your sports days? I'm kind of classic ADHD. Like I have trouble concentrating on things, but things I'm super interested in, I can just do a really deep dive focus. So I've always had that ability for what I'm into. I'm really into, and I can just pour everything into that. So
I think you probably need that a little bit. I mean, so many filmmakers, I think that's the thing they never talk about in film school. It's like, oh, are you ADHD? Are you OCD? Are you Asperger's? Good. You kind of need to be a little bit for
I think that.
Yeah. And so many, it's kind of unsaid, but I think all my friends are now like, oh yeah, you're OCD. Of course. I thought I was different. And then I was like, no, I'm total ADHD. Of course, you know?
Yeah. I've always wondered that my memory for film, art, culture, and things I'm passionate on are just total single-minded drive. But when it comes to where my keys are, doing my tax return, and any real life ad, I'm a fucking mess. God bless my girlfriend for picking up the slack. No, I can't.
We all are. I have tremendous gaps in, the real world. And I remember Cassavetes said it best, that film was the great parallel world for us, like it's a parallel world where we can live in. And I've always taken that to heart. I live in this kind of parallel film universe where the rules are a little different. I hate it when the real world encroaches on it, but it's fine. Everybody finds their place.
For sure. So. Scott Rudin said he wanted you for School of Rock, and you said yourself, I'm not quite sure what you see in me that makes you think I'd be good for this high school family film. Did you ever clarify what movie or why he thought obviously you totally smashed it and it was a great movie, but I was wondering what his vision of you was for
that's funny. He had been offering me films, or I had been had inquiries from him. I'd never talked to him, but things had come my way over the years and I'd always turned them down. And this was just one more. Strangely, he's a unique producer that way. And so I passed again. And then I got a call saying, oh, Rudin's not accepting your pass. And I was like, what? And so he had just determined, I think he was thinking Dazed and Confused, and he'd like my recent film Tape, just from when I met him. I don't know. He didn't tell that much. He had it in his head I would be perfect for this. And I didn't. It was just, at that point, I thought it was a little cheesy. I was like, I can't deliver a lot of this. He said, well, what would you change? I heard in his voice, he was like, well, what would you do different? He was really asking me like, you want my opinion? Yeah, the ending sucked. I like Jack Black and I like this character, but this is kind of dumb. And that's kind of, that doesn't make sense. And he was like, we talked for a couple hours. And then he hooked me up with, and I was like, well, what I was hearing from him wasn't do this script. It was like, how do we make this better? Like a good producer. But I hadn't done that. I hadn't come aboard something that was going to maybe exist with or without me. I'd turned it down for years and years, but I was in kind of a positive, I don't know, for personal reasons. My kid was the age of the kids in the movie. I felt I was dialed into that. I really knew Jack's character. I liked him as a comic actor. He has such an interest. And there were all these reasons that I started thinking like, I could make a cool movie here and I could express myself. This is fun. And I don't know. It just suddenly felt like a challenge. And I was lucky to get the rein to get with Mike White, who had written the script, Jack and we formed this kind of trio of let's just make a cool film that we're happy with, that we'd be proud of. Mike was in his own thing with Scott, like he was calling him up. Scott, you have to just kind of work with and around a little bit, So, but I realized first on, this guy's really smart. I better be a step ahead of him. You get a step behind him, you probably get crushed. So my little studio experiences, my 2 other studio experiences kind of let me be ready for that and just experienced enough, just confident enough. And it really opened up my horizons like, you need a director. It's a director's medium.
Yeah.
I come in and bring my own methodologies. Like we're going to get a real band. We're going to get non-actors if necessary, who can play guitar and drums. We're going to make and they were like, what? We were just going to get actors and then you fake all that. I'm like, no, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to get kids who can play and I'll get performances out of them. They're like, okay. So no, we're going to get this. And like everyone around is going, okay. I'm like, oh, I'm coming in and I'm doing what a director does. I just didn't know I could do it in that system. But of course you can. Everyone needs someone with a vision, who can tell the story. That's what a director does. You make those choices. You're telling the story. It has to make sense to you. So I got rid of a lot of little plot points that I'm not good at or it didn't make sense. It was overly plotted. Like, let's just get to the thing, and everybody kind of came aboard, So it was a great creative experience ultimately. And it was the best of all worlds to kind of be rocking and rolling with Jack Black and Mike, and then have the support of a producer like Scott Rudin and the studio. So when you need that Andrew Lloyd Webber song, that's kind of a funny thing. In my indie world, people would come out, oh, we can't afford that. We can't.
Yeah.
We would say it, and the next day it'd be like, okay, yeah, we got that. So that's the difference between
Amazing.
30 million to have a $30 million budget. It's very different than having a $6 million budget when it comes to, oh, can we get that AC/DC song, or can we use that lyric? Or, indie film is, you can't, how do you do it without all these things? That was like, okay, we can use all that to really make it as good as we can. So it was fun, man. It was really fun.
I watched Apollo yesterday, which was so beautiful, such a warm film, man. I was so great to watch.
Oh,
Did you use rotoscope again? Is this the same technique you used in Waking Life?
No, I mean it's a very different technique. That was kind of interpolated. Waking Life and Scanner Darkly, those are so long ago. It's really a different technique altogether. It's not interpolated. In the rotoscope, we just use that for the kind of the line drawing for the characters. I would call it performance capture, but really Apollo it's much more of a traditionally animated film, 2D and some 3D with rotoscope. It's kind of a collision of styles, purposefully so, to kind of, we're trying to get this unique kind of analog look for a film that's, obviously all digital, but, trying to get these textures and stuff. So the animation was quite fun, but as you can tell, it's come a long way in the years. And I was rocking and rolling with Tommy and, the companies we were working with. And I don't know, it was really, again, it was really, really fun, really expressive.
Were you using real locations or was that all green screen?
100% green screen.
Whoa.
We got it live, but yeah, not, we were recreating a world that doesn't exist, largely Astro World and these games and all the Apollo stuff. So yeah, no, it's all imagined and created.
The ice lolly scene killed me. Is that a true story of
the which one? Which scene?
The ice lolly? The ice pop, sorry, we call them ice lollies in the UK. The ice pop where they get frozen to their tongues.
I'm sorry. We call them popsicles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that really happened.
So funny.
It was like putting your tongue on dry ice. Yeah. Well, I found out that scene went on longer. It just didn't, you slowly pour water on it and melt it off. If you pull it off, you just get blood, right? So there was a way to escape the clutches of dry ice from your popsicle. So that was just, the movie is really a chronicle of like childhood horrors, these little things in a fun way.
Yeah, I relate. So much of those times where when you look back, like this was completely insane. What were my parents thinking, driving like this or strapping things to the roof like that and stuff? It was just crazy.
Yeah.
How did you choose to meld the fantasy Apollo element with family history?
Well, in my mind, they were just sort of melded together, this kind of youthful. I probably had that fantasy when I was in maybe first grade, living in the Houston area. I was like, oh yeah, I remember thinking, how you're a kid, you don't know how the world works really. You don't know your place in it, or, it was just kind of a fun the fact that I remembered that fantasy all these years later, and I was also thinking about having grown up near NASA. Every film you do, you have to feel kind of chosen, or like you're the only one who could be making this movie. That's the way I felt about like School of Rock or some other. It's like, oh, I'm the only one who can make this right, or I'm the best person. I've turned down so many films where like, I'm not the best person. Someone else would do better here. This isn't my wheelhouse. So I like to feel that way, or you should feel that way every movie you're doing. Like, oh, I'm the one. You got to be just delusional enough. But I was thinking about my own childhood. It was actually year 2 of Boyhood where it crossed my mind when I had that year to think, oh, second grade, whatever, to kind of infuse those each year with kind of as much detail as I could remember, that I hit on, oh, I was living near NASA at that time. We were walking on the moon. That was actually a pretty interesting time to be a kid. I haven't really ever seen that in a movie, like just to be in the shadow of NASA. And then I thought of this fantasy I had. This is probably like 2004. So that's where the seed of Apollo was. So I thought about it over the years. I was like, oh, that's a fun movie. And those two things were always blended. Life back then as a kid and this Apollo mission, those just were always, that was always the story, to try to depict the mission itself via this fantasy and show, just tell a story about a family or a time and a place. So, yeah, that's where it was born. I didn't write the script for probably 10 years, 9 or 10 years. I just had notes and ideas and then started taking it more seriously, I guess around the time Boyhood was over. Strangely, yeah. It was like, okay, I've got another kid movie in me. And this one's very different. It's the fantasy, and it's where nothing happens in Boyhood. This is everything. They land on the moon. It's kind of the greatest feat people have ever done, engineering wise anyway. So yeah, the stakes couldn't be different. And yet it's still kind of a kid story that, in the neighborhood there.
Oh, you filmed this at Robert Rodriguez studio. Was that Troublemaker?
Yeah. Well, we have a studio too. We have 2 studios right next to each other here in Austin. It's Austin Film Studios and Troublemaker are just, practically neighbors. So we kind of flow in between. We shoot things there, and Robert uses our stages, and I don't know. We're a pretty tight community, He's got the biggest green screen though, so it made total sense to film there.
Oh, of course. He's probably got that from like Sin City days.
Yeah.
Have you guys been pals since? Did you guys come up? You guys come up around the same time?
I'm older than him by a bit, but yeah, El Mariachi was like 1 year after Slacker, so it was kind of, we were close, but we met somewhere around there.
What other filmmakers are you friends with
in Austin?
Yeah.
Well, shortly thereafter, Mike Judge moved to town somewhere in there. So he was doing not only his Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill, but he was also doing his first films and stuff. So Mike, I don't know, others, a lot of people came through town. We have, there were the kind of the previous generation around too. It's kind of amazing. Terry Malick lives here. So, but he's not using our studio so much, but he's around. He'll visit a set and stuff. And
you're friends with Caveh as well. I love Caveh.
Oh, yeah. We've never lived in the same town, but we've been buddies. I tell people at film festivals, like, go see each other's films. I met Caveh at Sundance in 91. He was there with A Little Stiff. I was there with Slacker. And, you just kind of bond. You like what they're about.
Did you see his recent film where he's a film programmer? The students are all recording their own video diaries of their recounts of a day.
Wait, what's the name of this one? I think the last thing from him is just his show about the show.
No, it's called The New School. I think it's called. He teaches in New York.
Yeah, no, he teaches at the New School.
And he kind of basically, as an exercise, had them film a semester. And there's all these intense discussions going around. Everyone records their own video diaries, and then you get to edit another person's diary.
Oh, wow.
So if you come in there all hot, like, Richard was pissing me off today, blah, 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 that's going to stay in because someone else is going to edit it. You can't censor yourself afterwards.
You got to live with whatever you're putting down on film.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty intense. That sounds like a pure Caveh exercise, doesn't it?
I love the fact he's teaching and getting paid for teaching, but then also making a movie on top of that. It's such a great Caveh move. With
Caveh, you're immediately in some meta situation where everything is kind of folding in on itself. Yeah,
I can't even pitch. When I pitch show about the show, I still haven't got my elevator pitch right for the show. Everyone always says, as a programmer, what should I be watching? And I always say show about the show. But then when I go off like, well, he's trying to make a show, so he's making a show about that. And the next episode is.
Yeah, next episode is about the making of the last one, which was about the one before. It's just about,
I never sell it well. It's kind of impossible. But
it's hard to sell, but man, people who get obsessed with it get obsessed with it. Caveh, he gets the deepest reactions. I suggest him to, when I see someone's pretty hardcore about film, if they haven't already seen some of Caveh's films, I turn them on to it and the show about the show, just because, like, okay, this is truly personal hardcore,
Yes, fearless.
I was always suggesting to Caveh, it's like, you got to, like, find 1 degree of separation. You got to, like, instead of making your character a filmmaker, make him like a professor, make him a lawyer. Woody Allen would always just, give him some job that's not you.
Yeah.
But it's you, but just in a different, and Caveh, he just couldn't do it. He's always like, no, it's 100% realistic to what it is, that's how his mind works.
There's no filter. Even when we showed his recent film and I said, you know what, take the takings and put it toward the next show about the show. And he said, great, is there any budget for me to come over as well? Can you fly me out and put me up? And I was like, no, we're broke, but... And I was like, shit, am I going to be the next show about the show playing like the cheap London programmer who can't afford to bring him out?
Yeah, you quickly... No, I as friends with Caveh, I've always done the dance like a lot of people. I realized he would come in and he'd have a tape recorder. He'd turn it on. So where'd you and start asking questions? I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm going to be very circumspect. And, when he was in Waking Life, he's in that, a lot of people's favorite scene in Waking Life. He did a thing with me where he made me, he said, okay, yeah, I'll be in the movie, Rick. We'll do that scene with you. But you have to be in a movie I'm making at the same time. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. So he interviewed me. He was here for 2 days on Waking Life. And he pulled me aside and we did an interview, and he was making a film. Have you ever heard about this?
No.
It was called Portrait of Caveh Zahedi as a Complete Failure. And it was, his instruction to me was, okay, I'm interviewing, but I'm not me. I'm just a filmmaker who's trying to find Caveh. Caveh's missing. No one's heard from him. For all we know, he could be dead. He's gone. So I'm trying to piece together his life from just material I've gathered, things I knew him. So the guy interviewing me wasn't Caveh. It was this person who seemed to know Caveh and have some inkling of things said and done, but he's trying to piece together Caveh's. And so it was very weird for Caveh to be looking at me and not pretend it's not Caveh. So he said, where did you meet Caveh? Oh, at the Sundance Film Festival. It's like, oh, did you, then he started to ask other, why do you think Caveh's career, why do you think your career has gone better than Caveh's? Or like, why do you think Caveh hasn't gotten? I'd be like, well, Caveh just didn't have that little bit of bullshit you need to smooth things through and make deals, just a little, maybe it's a personality thing. He's just too
raw. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a little too hardcore. So it was weird looking at him, but analyzing him too about, Caveh, he's just like, someone wants to help him and he's like, yeah, give me the money. Instead of like, oh, thanks for the good idea. Or, it's called smooth social relations.
Mm.
You know, as much as Caveh demands honesty, honesty is a blunt instrument. You know, give everyone a little wiggle room before you put them in a corner. You know, I was like somewhere between advice, therapy, critique. It was unnerving, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But of course. But then I asked Caveh, to me, it's a great lost Caveh film. I asked him a year or so later, what happened to that film? He says, oh, I had to quit. It was just too much to keep hearing about. I said, well, you did. Seems like it's the ultimate film, you know, where you interview your friends about. But I always bring that one up because I want some pressure on him to finish that film.
Yeah, it seems unlike him to back down from something like that.
I don't know if he lost. I don't know what it was, but or maybe he lost. I don't know. I always bring it up to him just to embarrass him, I guess.
Final question. Do you have a dream project or a passion project that you want to get off the ground, or is there one that sticks out?
Yeah, I mean, I have several I would put in that category. Yeah, for a long time, I've been working on. The Brits don't really know the American transcendentalists, do they? Do you know who Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau are?
No.
Margaret Fuller. Yeah, this is, I find this to be true. They're taught in American schools because they're kind of like the first American philosophers, 19th century, but they really, you know, kind of set the American tone philosophically, maybe artistically, politically, everything, you know. So we're talking like 1830s New England, 30s through the Civil War and all that. They were just these very influential thinkers, writers, all writers. Have you ever heard of Walden?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Thoreau.
Right.
Henry. He's kind of the quintessential American dropout, or I don't know. He gets used by every generation that comes next. The hippies loved him because he was civil disobedience. He wouldn't pay taxes because of slavery. He was just really hardcore, lived in a cabin alone that he built, and, you know, just all about, and Emerson wrote extensively on self-reliance. And there was a lot of really brilliant women around, Margaret Fuller and the Peabody sisters. I don't know. It's a really rich time. So I've been trying to make a movie or something about them. You know, it's kind of like my kind of thing. A bunch of people talking, you know, thinking, and they're pretty radical folks. So I don't know. I've been working on that for like 20 years. Someday. I'm working on it right now. I'm working on it today, actually. So it's been an ongoing thing, but I don't know. They're so American, you know, they were really defining what America was without, you know, what was the American philosophy? What was American? Who's the great American poet? When we started, the country's only like, you know, 60, 70 years old. So it's a new country defining itself. And they were kind of on the cutting edge of it. But they were heavily influenced, obviously, by, you know, European thought and artists, but it's like they were their own branch. So I don't know. I see them as historically really significant. But I don't know, something I've been playing with for a long time. So that's one project. I have others. I have a stack of scripts. So, you know, hopefully I get to make someday.
Sure. That's a good note to end on. Thank you so much for taking the time. This is such a pleasure to talk to you, being such a fan of your movies.
Yeah, good talking to you. I hope people will look up Apollo and watch it. It was a fun film to work on during the pandemic.
For sure. I loved it.
I think because we're PG-13 over here. I don't know what the ratings is over there, but...
Oh, wow. Right.
Because we had smoking in it for realism. But it makes it not a kids or a family film somehow. I was asking Netflix, like, why isn't this film on and they're like, oh, yeah, you're PG-13. We can't put it out there. So anyway, you got to tell people to look it up. Okay,
cool. I'll push that at the beginning of the pod.
Yeah, it's not going to come to them. They have to go to it.
Cool. And I'll tell Caveh to send you that documentary I recommended. I think you'll really get a kick out of it.
So it's a documentary. And is it come out? Is it available?
No, he gave it to us along with the other one we showed called How to Overthrow the Government, which was his one before that. But he did, I think every semester he kind of knocks a documentary out as the men exercise in the class. But he's always interesting.
Yeah, that's a good exercise. I think his students are benefiting greatly just to be around an artist who's really pushing themselves and them, and whatever films they go on to make, probably not exactly like his, or who knows, but it's a good lesson in personal filmmaking, and I think that's where the indie world should forever resides. Should.
And at the end of film, he always makes them do an impression of Caveh, which is like a really fun sadistic exercise. Okay, deal.
Okay, I definitely have to see that. So,
thanks again, Richard. I've been such a fan. Such a pleasure.
Okay, yeah. Hey, great talking to you.
Thank you, buddy. Have a good day.
Yeah. Okay, man. Okay. Take care. Okay, bye-bye.
Boom! That's me and Richard Linklater. What an amazing guy. If you've listened to this podcast before, when I get to speak to those OG directors that really formed my taste and vision of cinema, those ones really get me deep, and this was a dream. Also, Apollo 10.5. Go watch it. It's so good. It's streaming for free on Netflix, and go watch it. Give Richard some good viewing figures. Get him that Netflix money so he can make big, crazy stuff. As always, thanks to my podcast engineer, Ewan Hinselwood, and Joshua Eustace, aka Telefon Tel Aviv, for the beautiful music. Thank you for you guys for listening, and I'll see you next time.